Good evening, members. I am sitting in the chair. Councillor O'Neill, the chairman of this committee, sends his apologies and has asked me to chair it in his place. Thank you very much for attending this meeting of the Planning Committee. Welcome to all and to members of the press. May I know your declarations of interest, please? Councillor Nellams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm on item 5, Borough Chalets, Tresco, as an employee of Tresco Estate.
Thank you. It is very bright, so I might not see the light, so please don't hesitate to wave. Councillor Mrs Mumford.
No, sorry.
No, I can see your light.
Sorry.
Councillor Mrs Saville.
Chairman, a very minor, non-disclosable interest in one of the objections to P15033 is actually names my house.
Right.
Yeah, I will stay, I would vote, so yeah, but just in case.
Okay. Are there any other members? If not, I've got Mr Dryden.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Declare an interest in item 6 as the senior manager responsible for that particular project.
Thank you. Right, are there any further declarations of interest? No? In that case, we shall move on to item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Bilsborough.
Yes, Chairman. I'm willing to accept the resolution on page 4, the resolution where it says resolved 1, 2 and 3. But number 4, where it says that members not listed in the membership do not be ordinarily granted access to meetings of the local plan working group. I am not attempting to revisit the argument that we had, I assure you of that. But I'm just not quite happy with the way it's worded. I cannot recall, nor can I find on the website, webcast, that we actually made a resolution that the members who weren't on the working group couldn't attend it. I know Councillor Mrs Grottitt was going to propose this, but in the end it was not accepted. Therefore, I wish for clarification. Does this committee have the power to exclude members from attending a working party? Because this is what it sounds like.
I think this committee is enabled to exclude or make decisions about the local plan working group simply because it is a subgroup of this committee. It wouldn't have the right to make decisions about working groups per se. Mr Dryden, would you like to come on? The planning officer.
This committee can discharge its functions any way it wishes as long as it's within its remit, if you like. If that's the way it wishes to make decisions.
Yeah. Would you... sorry, Councillor Nellams, did you wish to come in on this?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. It was just on that point. It says not be ordinarily granted. I thought at the time that meant that anybody could actually be invited.
It's at the discretion of the chairman.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's not people can't attend, it's just they're not on that list initially.
Now, what I found difficult to understand is they had to be invited. In other words, a chairman had the discretion to say to a member, yes, you can come, or no, we're not having you. And this is what it sounds like. And I don't think it should be one way or the other, but not relying on a chairman's judgment whether a member can attend a working group.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Saville.
Chairman, this has arisen in the past, as we are aware, and I recall that Richard Burriston, our legal advisor, actually sent all members an email around this, might be a couple of months ago, time goes so quickly, clarifying this issue for members. I confess I cannot recall the content of it now, but we did actually have an email, not just pertaining to the local plan working party, but other working parties as well. So I think maybe if we need further clarification, maybe Richard could repeat that email.
Yeah. Well, what I would suggest is, given that Councillor Bilsborough has proposed 1, 2 and 3 as they are, maybe we could just take a decision on those and bring back item 4 for, we could seek clarification, bring that back for
That, Chairman, yes.
the next planning meeting, if members are happy with that. So we have a proposer for 1, 2 and 3. Is there a seconder? Sorry, yeah, thank you. Okay, those in favour, please show. Thank you. Nobody against, nobody abstaining. Thank you. And we will get clarification on the fourth point. Right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to, I have no urgent items. I'm not aware of any. No, thank you very much. So we move on to part 1, reports requiring a decision. Agenda item 4, the packing shed and greenhouse at Lower Town, St Martin's. Report of the senior officer.
Thank you. As you'll see from the report, this is an application for rebuilding and a change of use of existing buildings at Lower Town St Martin's for use as a residential dwelling, specifically for use as a self-contained holiday let. The plans submitted indicate that the general position and form of the buildings will be recreated, but the old packing shed will be higher and wider, and the greenhouse will be reconfigured in terms of height, roof style, and it will also have a rear extension to the north. Principally, it's considered that the creation of the self-contained holiday let is contrary to the requirements of Policy 4 of the local plan. This, together with the cumulative loss of traditional features of these buildings and the lack of a full bat survey, have resulted in a recommendation for refusal of this proposal for the reasons set out in the report. Any questions?
Thank you. May I know your wishes or comments, please? Councillor Mrs Saville.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank the members that actually came to St Martin's on the site visit of this. I find this quite a difficult application to determine, basically because the buildings in question have been allowed to deteriorate into the state that you can currently see there, and right in a prime place on St Martin's, which obviously is not good in itself. However, I think the planning officer is absolutely correct that this does not meet the local plan policy as it currently stands. And although we are going out we're in the midst of consultation, read the new local plan, we can't even say we have an emerging plan at this stage. We are still legally bound by the one that is currently in use. So I do find it quite difficult. Personally, I think it's not an ideal location for a self-catering accommodation. It is right on the, I was going to say the main road, but I'll just say the road that goes through St Martin's. There are two accesses to the building. Certainly the one of them is actually, you're out of the door and you're on the road. And I think those who were at the site visit realised that there is a fair amount of traffic that actually go up and down the island. And the other door is at the end of the current garage there, and actually that is quite often used for larger vehicles to get around the tight corner of Fred's there anyway, and people, if they're getting out of the way of traffic, stand there. So also, I see in the plans that all the windows downstairs and the upstairs of the bedrooms are glazed. I guess that is to afford the occupants and the neighbours privacy. Obscured, sorry. Yeah, obscured glazing to allow privacy. So, Chairman, yeah, I think on this occasion I'm going actually with the recommendation of the planning officer that this application is refused.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Bennett.
I think, Chairman, I would support those views. The site visit left more questions being asked than were answered. However, although I agree with everything Chris has said, it does leave a dilemma of buildings which are falling into disrepair, which will soon be very unsightly, if not already. And yet it would be draconian to demand their refurbishment and upkeep without an income to support that. And very expensive, particularly on the off-islands, to do such work. Very expensive. So, as I say, it leaves more questions than it does answers.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Chairman, I too have wrestled with my conscience on this one because I don't like what's there now. It's a mess. And I also agree that if a building is to be viable, it has to have an economic use. I can't think of any other economic use for that building other than to convert it to a self-catering let. I too do have great concerns about that door which goes straight onto the road. A child running out of that door will be wiped out in an instant. So I think if we do pass it, we do need to ask for that door to be converted to a window or bricked up entirely. Other than that, I think in planning terms, it will make a better looking place on the road. And so I'd be inclined to vote against the planning officer's recommendations. I mean, to say that it's an existing building, vernacular building, isn't, to my mind, really an argument, because times change and the changes that have occurred in the economy of Surrey means a building like that is no longer able to be made viable. The only industry we have, as we've been reminded several times, is tourism, really. So I think it should be converted to something that can make some money. The other objection was to do with the European protected species and all that sort of stuff. I think we ought to ask that that be brought out as well, that people, that the bats and the birds and all that sort of thing should be checked up on, that the building can still act as a haven for those sorts of animals if need be. But I mean, in some ways I agree with Christine, but in the end my conscience has made me come down on the side that I would like to see something done with that building, and that this seems to me a reasonable solution.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Grotting.
Thank you, Chairman. I have read this carefully, and I did go on the site visit, and as well as the highways issue, and I think there are very real problems there. My understanding on reading this through is that much as we might have liked the buildings to have been improved, this application does not currently fit our planning guidelines. So I personally think that we have to follow the the advice of our planning officer, and so I think I wouldn't support this at this moment in time.
Thank you. Are there further comments? Councillor Sims, you putting right on that?
Yeah, I didn't go on a site visit. I couldn't because of work, so I'm going to actually I'm going to abstain on this one. But just it doesn't seem to me a great deal of utility. The local plan, in trying to maintain agricultural buildings when there's no use for them and they're falling to pieces. I can't see any utility in that whatsoever. It just seems, well, frankly, barking. And the other thing is, there's obviously, like I said, I didn't go on a site visit, there's obviously a door that goes out on the road, but there's any number, I can think of at least 8 off the top of my head, doors on St Mary's, which open straight out onto roads, and to my knowledge, I don't think there's been any accidents because of them. So, I mean, fair enough, it's a fact to take into account, but it doesn't seem to be an issue in other areas where it exists. So perhaps take it into consideration, but I don't think it should be overriding, and that was really all I'm going to say on this one.
Well, obviously we can only discuss this particular application, but thank you. Councillor Billsborough.
Very briefly, Chairman, I have read this thoroughly. As you probably know, I'm not an avid conservationist, but having read it, and to quote Craig on applications, on balance, I'm afraid I can't support the application, and I will go for refusal. It's a narrow decision. It was a hard decision to make, but I think in this case it's safer.
Right, thank you. If there are no further comments or questions, then I shall take the vote. It's been proposed and seconded. Councillor Mrs Bennett did, yeah. That we refuse this application. Those in favour of refusal, please show clearly. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, yeah. Those who are against refusal, please show clearly. 1. Thank you. And those who would abstain, please show clearly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, thank you very much. In that case, the application has been refused. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 5. I believe there was a declaration of interest. So, report to the senior officer.
Thank you. This is an application for the removal of 2 timber chalets that were erected in the 1970s at Borough Farm in Tresco and replacement with a single dwelling. As you'll see from the report, the removal of 2 chalets and replacement with a dwelling was approved in 2007. A condition to restrict occupation to staff was imposed, but a later appeal was allowed, which effectively modified this condition to allow it to be used by staff or for short-term holiday let. Whilst there has been a change to the planning policy framework since that decision, with the introduction of the National Planning Policy Framework in 2012, as you'll see from the report, this does not introduce any additional issues that would now make the replacement of the chalets with a single dwelling unacceptable. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out. And I'd just like to add that because there's been evidence of bats found following a bat survey, if members are minded to approve the application, it's recommended that this decision is delegated to officers pending the submission of amended plans to incorporate bat mitigation measures.
Thank you. Councillor Billsborough.
Yes, Chairman, I have read this detailed report. I cannot detect any reason for refusal, any valid reason, and therefore I'm proposing we accept the recommendation.
Yes, with the caveats as
yes,
expressed.
with the caveats, yes,
yeah.
of course, yes.
Thank you. Any further comments or Councillor Francis?
I would second if there are no further comments.
Right, thank you. Are there any other comments? No? In that case, I'll take the vote. Those in favour of approving, subject to the conditions as mentioned and the extra condition. Thank you. Please show clear. I think that's unanimous. Yes, nobody against, nobody abstaining. Thank you, that's carried. Somebody would like to relocate Councillor Nelligan's section. Thank you. And we will move on to a discussion of item 6. We'll give Mr. Dryden time to leave. The incinerator at Morewell Lane, the report of the senior officer, please.
Thank you. As you'll note from the report, this application is for the Council's own development as the waste authority for the islands. The application is specifically for the demolition only of the incinerator at Morewell following its decommissioning at the end of 2014. Planning permission is required for any unlisted building within a conservation area over 115 cubic metres. The decision can be made by the local planning authority, providing it's not contrary to any recommendation of Historic England. The demolition is the first phase to establishing a formalised household waste recycling and transfer facility on the islands. And as you'll note from the report, the application is considered to be acceptable subject to the conditions set out. I'd just like to add that subject to a further bat survey to ensure that the incinerator is not being used as a bat roost, the application is considered acceptable. The ecological report submitted with the application did find that it was unlikely that it would be used as a bat roost, but did recommend a further bat emergence survey took place.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, subject to the conditions outlined, I'd like to propose that we go ahead with this.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I would second it, and I would thought if anything you could put through under permitted development without a whisper, it would be this one. I'm quite intrigued why we need pictures of it. I'm sure we're all familiar with the incinerator. So I would definitely second this, and I do hope there were no bats in it.
Councillor Billsborough.
Two things, Chairman.
Can we allow Councillor Billsborough to?
It is obviously not a listed building, but seriously, I think if all these conditions have been imposed, quite rightly, they ought to be checked from time to time that they're not contravened when the thing is being dismantled, and we don't get complaints coming in where, of course, any sound of complaint, we ought to warn the people who are doing it that perhaps they're transgressing. They may not, but I'm just a little uneasy it could happen. But I do support that at the...
So you're broadly supportive, subject to constant monitoring of the conditions?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Saville.
Yes, can I emphasise that actually the children's centre is quite near the incinerator, and quite often children are playing in the vicinity there, and I would hope that when some of this work is taking place, fair warning could be given, certainly, well, to the residents, but certainly for young children at the children's centre, if they're, I think it's quite important to protect their health.
And I would presume there'll be notices put for passers-by and a bit of warning given, not just at the last minute. I mean, that would be helpful. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I would say I've seen the tender documents for this, and that is covered to death, really, I think. But that's an unfortunate phrase. It's very well covered.
Yes. Well, without the immortality, let's hope you're right. Okay. Are there any further comments or questions? No? In that case, it's been proposed and seconded that this be approved. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That looks unanimous to me. Nobody against them. Thank you very much. There are 2 reports in part 2 for information only, and there are no reports in part 3. So at 18:51, I declare this meeting over. Thank you very much for attending.